In the last video, I attempted to restore and upgrade the headlights on the UK's cheapest Nissan 350Z, and, well, it didn't really go to plan.
I spent the best part of a day taking apart the front end of this car to get those headlights off and disassembled so that I could take them apart and paint the insides into a more up-to-date black, satin black colour, and then also to restore those nasty looking oxidized headlight lenses. And we got everything painted up. It looked great. It looked fantastic when it was all reassembled. Once it was all back together and back on the car, that's when this sanding process started, and everything started off pretty good actually, until it came to the lacquer. This is where it all went wrong. The headlights look absolutely rubbish.
The passenger side headlight doesn't look great. Deep scratches in the headlights.
It looked awful. It looked like all my hard work had been for nothing. It all had to come off yet again. I did, however, have a little glimmer of hope. A headlight restoration kit online with Euro car parts, and for the sake of 20 quid, I think it's going to be worth a go just to bring these back. Unless you guys have got any other suggestions, please let me know in the comments section below. Which is exactly what you guys did, and you guys came through and showed all of your love and all of your support, and here are just a few of the comments that came through, and I really can't thank you guys enough for all your advice, all of your tips, all of your support. And I even got a comment from the main man himself, Mr. ChrisFix. Check this out.
You see, I was going to buy a headlight restoration kit that I had found online, but after asking you guys and all of the comments that you sent me, my stubborn side came out and I decided to give it another go. So to start with now, I'm going to have to sand back all of that lacquer that I put on in the previous video so that we can then get these cleaned up, ready to go, sand it down properly and get a nice finish this time. And talk about deja vu. So we're back to sanding these headlights down again, and you can see with the first go over, it was really just pulling off all of that lacquer. And when we get to the 1500 grit, it's a little bit clearer already. We then move on up to a 2000 grit, and again continuing with a wet sand and circular motions all the way around. We then move up to the 2500 grit, and you can already see the headlights are looking way better at this point. And instead of lacquering this time, here's what we did next. So I've gone over it, very agricultural looking, I know, but it was the orbital sander that I had with a polishing pad on top. But you know, you work with what you've got, and this actually turned out pretty damn good. Now, they're still not entirely perfect, but they are way better than they were. They're clear, you can see everything behind them. I ended up going up to a 2500 grit sandpaper. I even had one of you guys comment to say that they went up to a 5000 grit, which is something I could maybe look at doing again. But the only issue I do still have, and I think this may come down to when I had them separated in the first instance, was that there is a couple of nasty marks on the outside of this, or the inside should I say, of this lens. So I may have to separate that headlight again. I hope I don't, but if I do, I do. It sucks, but it's not the end of the world. The wipers are back on the car as well. I've had them painted and refitted those to the car so there's no flaking paint. I had a hell of a nightmare with that. I put them on the car to move the car and drive it. It was raining. I didn't have any tools with me, so I could only hand tighten the 14mm nuts. And ultimately the wipers didn't work, so that was a nightmare, but it's back. And you probably also know I'm back on my drive again. Yeah, guys, I'm back at home now. What a hell of a journey it's been, but I'm back, which means we can really crack on with some of these jobs now. So in today's video, I'm gonna have to get the car jacked back up because we've got a lot of work to get on with underneath. So let's go get on with that now. So I've taken the front wheels off of the car. They need to come off anyway, because I've got the front wheel bearings to do, track rod ends and things like that. But the order in which I was going to do things was easiest task first, hardest task afterwards, or at the end. But I'm a firm believer of how you do anything is how you do everything. So let's go ahead and get the hardest task done first, which is that upper oil pan, which means I have to take the exhaust off, the prop shaft, the gearbox, the clutch, everything off. I have to then get the engine supported. Then I can start lowering the subframe. Then we can get ourselves towards that oil pan. So this is the start of a mammoth task. Wish me luck, guys. Okay, so I've also just sprayed up everything that I'm going to have to loosen off. So in here I've got the bolts that hold the subframe up. There's one here and there's one on this side. I've also sprayed up the lower control arm bolt that is down here, and I've also, whilst I'm under here, sprayed up under on the front kidney as well, the engine mount bolt, which is just under here, sprayed up the thread, and again the kidney underneath we've got here, and in the center, so that we can lower them down. So I'm going to give them all a bit of a chance to work their way in, and then I'm going to start taking off the prop shaft, the exhaust, start working through to taking off the gearbox, the clutch, and going through things that way. But I'm going to give that a good chance to soak and work its way in, and hopefully I don't snap any bolts. I desperately don't want to snap, because if I do, the thread for that is actually in the body of the car. If I snap it off, it could be toast. So many people have snapped those, and I just really could do without doing that. So let's see how we go, but I'm going to give it a good chance for all of that to get to work and make a mess all over my driveway too, which I won't tell the wife about. Okay, now that the car is already jacked up and it's off the ground and I've got my coffee, I thought it'd be a great idea to show you the things that the car needs. And obviously you can see it's now tight for space around the driveway here, but you know, much like a lot of you guys watching are going to be doing, I've got to do all of this on my driveway, so space is tight, but I'm going to crack on with it anyway. So what I've got is two new front wheel bearings. The ones that I've got on the car at the moment are wearing, so I've got two there. I've got a new clutch master cylinder and slave cylinder, two outer tie rods, inner tie rods. I'm waiting for the outer tie rods to come. I've got two rear upper control arm ball joints to go in. I've got a replacement upper oil pan, which I've already cleaned out and got all of the old sealant off on mine. This has already snapped off. This was the bracket that I was telling you about, the starter motor sits in, so that is the reason why I've got to replace that. I've also got a new white line diff bush kit as well, and a new W brace for the backs. Mine is like a crisp packet, it's just rotten through. I'll show you when I get under the car. So I'm going to get set up underneath. I've also got to work out how this gearbox and engine support works, which means reading instructions, which I don't do too well. So yeah.
So whilst I pondered over having to get that support bar set up and read through the instructions, I decided to go inside the car and disconnect everything I was going to need to in order to be able to drop the gearbox, and that was just disassembling the whole mechanism that holds the gear stick in place. And underneath the car in a bit you'll see there's a little 10mm bolt just to disconnect all of that, but in here is now done. I can get under the car, start disconnecting the center part of the Y pipe. When I took the exhaust pipe out to take the gearbox off and replace the clutch a few months ago, I put two new bolts into that center pipe, and then it was just a case of releasing the 14mm nuts. As you can see, they were really quite stiff, and I did on the passenger side here have to get the angle grinder out and cut one of those off just to be able to disconnect it. So what will happen when I go to put things back together is I'll have to drill through and nut and bolt that one. That would be okay. With new gaskets in place, there won't be any issues with that at all. With the Y pipe out of the way, I can access a little stabilising bracket that is in the middle, just below the prop shaft, which would then give me access to disconnecting the prop shaft, which is held on by 4 17mm nuts and bolts. And once they was out, I could knock the prop shaft out of the way and slowly lower it down. Now, it is a carbon fibre prop shaft, so I want to make sure that I'm not knocking or banging or denting it in any way, just to protect it from any damage.
So I've just spent what feels like forever, but probably about the last 40 minutes trying to get a few bits off the car. I've managed to get off the centre pipe of the exhaust, which has got the damaged flex seat, which I mentioned about in another video. You can see how damaged that is. The prop shaft, the old W brace, which was also damaged. It looked like it was bottomed out, which was covering this bolt. So I had to pry that open to get that off. I mean, it's just rusted and crumbled. This thing is like holes everywhere. It's really bad. I've got the replacement one here, which you can see is brand spanking new, which is going to go on and ultimately fix that. But before I can get any of that on, things aren't as ideal. I'll show you underneath. The rear subframe mounts are just so heavily corroded. You can see here it's all just sort of crumbled away and sort of fell down on me, and everything is sort of down here on the floor in just nastiness. So both of them are going to have to come off and be replaced as well. I can't just go sticking the new W brace on, so that's another job I've got to add to list. And then we can look at getting some things back together. But it feels like you do one job and it brings another one and another one and another one. But you know, we'll make progress. We will get there with it. It's about doing it properly. So I just keep going. I've had to take off the rear subframe support arms because they are rusted through on both sides. They're really, really bad. And I've managed to scoop up that amount of rust from the two of them. So I'll show you under the car now, but I've taken both of those off. I've still got to take the remainder of this sort of support bracket underneath off as well. But I got the 19mm nut off, the two 14mm that hold that subframe support arm on. I've done the same on the other side as well. So like I said, I've got to take out this bracket, which means I can't get the new W brace back on today because I have to get them new arms. So I'm going to give Nissan a ring and find out how much they are. I'm also going to see if I can find some online. But it does mean I can carry on with taking off the gearbox and carrying on with everything up the front of the car. So that's what I'm going to get onto next. But I just thought I'd show you just what you're dealing with when you're looking at a 20-odd-year-old car. The bolts that are really frightening me are these 19mm bolts here that hold the banana arm on and are also holding this front kidney brace on. The reason why they scare me is I've seen so many people online talking about snapping that that particular thread because it's a thread that's in the chassis, and if you snap it in the wrong place, you're in serious trouble. Now, on the driver's side, it was really difficult to remove. I did a combination of WD-40 and cleaning the thread down with a wire brush, and ultimately I had to use heat to work it, and then I started to get it backwards and forwards, sort of loosen and tighten, just to break it off enough. I'm going to do this side now and loosen it off as best I can using the same process I did on the driver's side. So I'm going to clean it up first, and then I'm going to go with a little bit of heat. there we go. I can start, there we go, working it off loose and tightening it up, clearing those threads out. It's quite a dirty thread, so I'm going to go over it with a wire brush again, and then we'll get it off the car. Then I need a Red Bull. Right, now that I have loosened off those kidney brackets and I know we're not going to have any troubles when it comes to taking those bolts out, I'm going to lift the bonnet. I'm going to start releasing the few bolts on the front, or from above the engine, should I say, to the gearbox.
And they were pretty easy to get to. There was 3 17mm bolts that I could reach from the top of the engine. I had to remove a 10mm bolt that held a little bracket in to get the socket in, but once I've got them done, I could go ahead and get back under the car. Once I was back under the car, it was simply a case of removing the wiring harness that goes around the gearbox to make sure everything was disconnected and out of the way. I had to disconnect the remaining bolts that were in the gearbox, any sensors that were also connected, and then I could get the gearbox jack in. Now I had to be really careful here because the weight isn't evenly distributed on this gearbox, but once it came out there was a little bit of jiggling around, and then I could lower the gearbox down. Just trying my hardest so that it didn't roll off of the gearbox stand and end up hurting myself. I think this gearbox weighs about 50 kilos, so I really didn't want this one hitting me on the head.
Okay guys, so now the gearbox is off the car, the starter motor and all of the brackets and the tray, and here is the culprit in particular from the oil pan that's given us the issue. That's where the starter motor fixes into, and it's broken, and so far everything has held up well for the last few hundred miles since I've done the clutch change. Everything's looking pretty good, but let's go have a little look under the car now. And I can show you the clutch assembly itself. Now I've got to be really careful because I'm in big trouble with the missus. That is a load of gearbox oil. It's fresh gearbox oil, so it doesn't smell as bad as old gearbox oil, but I'm still going to be in big trouble, so I need to get the pressure washer out for that. But as you can see, the clutch assembly up here is next to come off, so I'm going to tackle that. You can actually see where the upper oil pan is broken. Let me get a little closer and show you. It's actually this section here. Now it's not actually leaking any oil, but it's a nasty looking mess, so I am going to get that done anyway. Now let me squeeze my way back out from under the car and round to the front. Now guys, that is going to be the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If these are the kind of videos you guys enjoy watching, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and in the next video we're going to get everything else off that we need to, subframe down, that support bar across the top of the engine, and then we're going to get that oil pan done. Thank you so much for watching guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.